At 28, Saya possessed a teaching degree that was gathering dust inside a cardboard tube and a heart full of grand theories about pedagogy. Yet she spent her afternoons in a bathrobe, paralyzed by the gap between her idealized dreams and the messy reality of effort. She was a gold medal dreamer. To Saya, the idea of being a teacher was a beautiful, static image. But the act of being a teacher, the lesson plans, the unruly behavior, the early mornings, the inevitable failures, felt like a mountain she wasn't quite ready to climb. She told her friends she was waiting for the right opening, the right district, or the right sign from the universe. In truth, Saya was addicted to the safety of her own potential. As long as she didn't try, she couldn't fail. She could remain the brilliant educator in her head, untarnished by the friction of the real world. The stagnation was broken on a Tuesday afternoon when her father, Tatsumi, arrived unannounced. Tatsumi was a man who is a retired mail carrier. He found Saya sitting on her floor, surrounded by printed resumes she hadn't mailed. He didn't lecture her. He didn't ask why she wasn't working. He simply sat on her mismatched sofa, watched her for a long minute, and then looked at the stacks of books. "You have a lot of maps for someone who never leaves the house," he said softly. "I'm planning, Dad," she snapped, her voice thin with the defensiveness of the chronically stagnant. "I want to make sure I'm going somewhere where I can actually make a difference. I don't want to waste my life in some mediocre suburb teaching kids who already have everything. I have a vision." Tatsumi stood up, walking to the window that looked out onto a gray alleyway. He didn't look back at her when he spoke. The sentence he uttered was quiet, but it carried the weight of a life spent in motion. "The world doesn't need more people who love the idea of light, Saya. It needs people who are willing to burn." Saya didn't understand at the moment. She asked her father a question, hoping he would tell her the deeper meaning. "This world is already full of people who only comment and daydream. If you are one of them, then you are superfluous to the world and to yourself." He said, "True passion isn't something you wait for. It only arises the moment you decide to throw yourself into it and start burning." For the first time in years, Saya felt a flush of genuine shame. She realized she had been treating her dream like a museum exhibit, something to be looked at and admired, but never touched, never used, and never sacrificed for. She wanted the warmth of the fire without the consumption of the wood. She wanted the identity of a teacher without the exhaustion of the labor. That night, Saya searched for the places no one else wanted to go. She looked for the resource-scarce, the understaffed, and the at-risk. She found a small, rural district in the high desert, 100 miles away, a place where the school was a collection of modular trailers and the teacher turnover rate was a revolving door of burnout transients. 3 weeks later, Saya was driving a rusted SUV packed with her life's essentials across a landscape that looked like the surface of the moon. It was a grit-toothed settlement of sun-bleached houses and wind-battered fences. When she walked into her classroom, a cramped trailer with a leaking HVAC unit and a chalkboard that was more gray than black, the old Saya screamed to turn back. There were no pastel posters here. There were 24 plastic chairs, half of them cracked, and a stack of textbooks from 1998. The first month was a catastrophe of the ego. Saya arrived with her visionary lesson plans about critical thinking and global citizenship, only to find that half her fourth graders were reading at a second grade level and 3 of them hadn't had a hot meal since Friday. They didn't look at her with adoration. They looked at her with the weary skepticism of children who had seen 4 different dreamers quit before Thanksgiving. One boy in particular, Tomo. He was 10. With eyes that seemed to have seen a century. He didn't disrupt the class. He simply sat in the back, drawing intricate, dark patterns on his desk with a pencil, refusing to open a book. The old Saya would definitely have wanted to give up easily. She would have retreated into her apartment and cried about how unappreciated she was. But Tatsumi's words were a low hum in her marrow. The new Saya wants to realize her dream. She arrived at the school at 5:30 a.m. to fix the air conditioning herself with a YouTube tutorial and a borrowed wrench. She spent her meager paycheck on boxes of granola bars and second-hand books from a thrift store 3 towns over. She stopped looking for the breakthrough and started looking for the inch. Weeks turned into months. The burn began to manifest in Saya's appearance. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her hands were perpetually stained with ink and chalk. She was thinner, her skin tanned and toughened by the desert wind. Under the vast, unobstructed desert stars, Saya stood on the bed of her truck. She didn't talk about educational outcomes. She talked about the children as if they were the most precious resource in the wasteland. In that moment, Saya saw the fragility of the bridge she was building. The old Saya would have made a promise she couldn't keep, or she would have been terrified by the responsibility. But the new Saya understood that to burn meant to be a constant source of heat, even when the wood was damp. That winter, during her vacation, Saya went back to her hometown to reminisce with her father. "How's the vision, Saya?" he asked, a small smile playing on his lips. "You were right," she whispered. "The world doesn't need people who love the idea of light. The light doesn't actually do anything until it hits something and turns into heat." "I'm finally warm, Dad." Saya drove back to the desert the next morning. She didn't need a sign from the universe. She didn't need a perfect opening. As she crossed the state line, the sun began to rise over the mesas, bleeding deep purples and oranges across the horizon. Saya didn't just look at the sunrise. She drove straight into it, ready for the long, beautiful, exhausting day of burning.
If you enjoyed this story, please share it with others and subscribe to this channel. Thank you for your time.